Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the evening of December 11, 2023 in the United States, the morning of December 12, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, Sky News in Arabic today reported from Egyptian sources that Israel has asked Egypt and Qatar to broker a new hostage deal between Israel and Hamas in exchange for a humanitarian truce in the Gaza Strip. The report stated, and I'm quoting, Israeli government is open to listen to negotiators' proposals for hostage exchange under conditions that may improve. In addition, Axios also reported that Israel expressed a willingness to Qatar to debate a new deal, foregoing its previously held position that all women and children that are held in the Gaza Strip must be released first before Israel will be willing to listen to any further deal. Israel is now asking Qatar, according to this report, to broker a new deal regardless of that previous condition. Responding to this, a member of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's political bureau, Abu Ali Shaheen, stated to the Lebanese Hezbollah affiliate El Miadin that, I'm quoting, there is no negotiation about humanitarian truce. The American government is the one who is actually running the war. A humanitarian truce in exchange for hostage release is out of the question. So those reports are that Israel has asked negotiators to begin brokering a new deal, and that is the first response that came from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Moving on to the ongoing fighting, there were continuous rockets and mortars sent from the Gaza Strip, pummeling both the south and the central parts of Israel. More rockets were sent in the last 2 days. Mortars targeting the south, targeting the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip, among them Nativ HaSara, Michtaim, Amioz, Nachal Oz, Nir Yitzchak, Sufa, among others. Rockets and missiles were also sent towards the central parts of the country. These targeted the Gush Dan area. There were alerts that went off in Tel Aviv, Bat Yam, or Yehuda. In Chulon, there was a direct hit of a rocket in a building. One citizen was injured, and the building was severely damaged, as well as in Rishon LeZion, where there was a direct hit of shrapnel from some of the rockets. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, fighting was primarily, again, in the areas of Jabalia refugee camp, Sajaiya in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, as well as in Khan Yunis. In Jabalia refugee camp, the IDF uncovered an RPG training site in a local mosque, and a large weapons cache was also found within that mosque. There was ongoing fighting reporting as the IDF continues to go street to street and alley to alley. There are also reports that the IDF evacuated the school housing internally displaced Palestinians, and while the majority were allowed to leave, some were arrested in the process. Responding to some of the international criticism and pressure, the IDF today published pictures of those Palestinians who were arrested, this time fully clothed, and this time it was published by the official spokesperson's office of the IDF rather than through social media. The report says there's substantial progress that the IDF is making within the Jabalia refugee camp, and that it is close to taking complete control of the area. In Sajaiya, there are reports that the IDF is also closing in on the neighborhood, however, that it is not advancing as fast as is expected, nor is it advancing as fast as in Jabalia refugee camp, and that there are particular gun battles with different Hamas operatives. Some of these were caught on camera, and they included the Hamas operatives emerging from a clinic and trying to ambush IDF soldiers. Moving on to the Khan Yunis area, the continuing ongoing battles, the IDF stormed a school today that was being used before as a staging ground by Hamas. In the operation, a rigged explosive device was detonated. 5 IDF soldiers reported killed in this operation. Other attacks that were reported against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad Command Center in the heart of Khan Yunis, in which weapons were confiscated, substantial intelligence material was found, and entrances to at least one tunnel were revealed. There are also reports that the IDF is continuing to operate both in the areas surrounding Khan Yunis and in the heart of the city. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated that Hamas in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip is at a breaking point, adding that the IDF is completely surrounding its last strongholds in Jabalia refugee camp and in Sajaiya. I will note that while this appears to be true according to reports, the IDF is not still taking over the entirety of the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, and there are some refugee camps, and specifically the town of Deir al-Balach in the central parts of the Gaza Strip between the north and Khan Yunis, that the IDF has not entered yet. Regarding casualties, the IDF is reporting that in addition to those 5 IDF soldiers that are reported that were killed in Khan Yunis, 3 more were killed, 2 were killed today, and 1 died from injuries suffered several days ago, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers that were killed since the invasion of Gaza began to 106, with 582 injured. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that upwards of 18,205 Palestinians have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began, and 49,645 are reported injured, and there are still 8,000 and rising that are considered missing, many of them under the rubbles and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The Shalom Crossing has been officially opened. This is the crossing between Israel, Egypt, and the Gaza Strip. The crossing is not open for the entrance of aid trucks into the Gaza Strip. It has been opened for the inspection of aid trucks by Israel. Trucks are going to be inspected there in addition to the Nitzana crossing, and then they will have to travel to Egypt in order to enter the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing. While Israel's under a lot of pressure from the United Nations to open Kerem Shalom in order to allow trucks to actually enter the Gaza Strip, Israeli civil administration today put out a tweet in which it blamed UN inefficiency in allowing more aid trucks to enter through the Rafah crossing, publishing a picture of a lineup of hundreds of trucks that have been inspected by Israel already that are waiting to enter, and stating that it is in fact UN inefficiency that is stopping aid from flowing into the Gaza Strip faster. Other news related to the humanitarian situation, UNRWA today reported that nearly 1.9 million Palestinians, that is 85% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip, have been uprooted during the war, and there are reports of growing infectious diseases that are being identified within the internally displaced camps, most of them located in the Moasi area and in the area surrounding Rafah. A total of 100 aid trucks carrying food, water, and medical supplies entered the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This has been the same number in the last several days, so it appears to be the new standard and deal between the sides, as well as 120,600 liters of fuel that were permitted to enter, which also appears to be the average new number that Israel is approving after it was called by the United States to double the amount of fuel that enters the Gaza Strip every day. Moving on to the West Bank, substantial IDF activity was reported in the Balata refugee camp, as well as in the villages of Dora and Tarkumia. Confrontations with Palestinians and the IDF were reported in most of these areas, and many weapons were confiscated. In the Beitilu village, a drone was found and confiscated by the IDF. A total of 18 Palestinians were reported arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Some political news relating to the West Bank. The EU Foreign Minister today, Joseph Borrell, stated that he is going to propose to members of the EU to impose personal sanctions against radical settlers involved in violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. France's foreign ministry also announced it is considering this move, while the foreign ministries of Germany, France, and Italy added to these statements that they call upon the EU to intensify sanctions against Hamas and Hamas supporters as well. So this is part of a growing trend after the United States said it is going to impose sanctions against radical settlers in the West Bank that are responsible for violence against Palestinians. The EU is increasingly stating this as well. Other political news, Defense Minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, today stated that he is in favor of allowing the re-entry of Palestinian workers from the West Bank into Israel. This has been an ongoing issue in Israel. It was proposed by Netanyahu and by the Shabak that Israel allow the entrance of Palestinian workers from the West Bank into Israel in order to ease the economic burden in the West Bank and also in order to de-escalate some of the tensions. However, as this was brought before the cabinet in Israel, Netanyahu decided not to call a vote because he was afraid that the ministers would not support the move. According to Yoav Gallant, he stated, and I'm quoting, "The sites in Gaza create a deterrence for West Bank residents, but also sympathy for some. We do not want to let what's happening motivate thousands of people to become violent in the West Bank, and thus I propose treating those 99% of the people properly. Good economy and prosperity among Palestinians in the West Bank is an Israeli security interest." A security official also noted in the meeting that 37% of the Palestinians' economy in the West Bank relies on workers from Israel. Right now, there's no decision made by the Israeli government about allowing the re-entry of Palestinian workers from the West Bank into Israel. Moving on to the north of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there were substantial rockets and mortars sent from Lebanon towards Israel today. Rockets started in the Shtula area in the western Galilee, Kiryat Shmona, Malot Tarchisha in the upper Galilee, as well as Kfar Vadim, among others. There was also a barrage of 15 RPG anti-tank missiles that were launched from Lebanon towards Metula. They caused substantial damage to upwards of 15 houses. One of them was completely destroyed. All these villages have been evacuated since the war began, so there's no casualties reported in these areas. However, one of the homes is reported destroyed. Regarding IDF retaliations, IDF retaliated with artillery against different launching sites. It also reported air raids against different Hezbollah units, a Hezbollah military infrastructure, as well as other targets. The reports in Lebanon are that the IDF retaliations focused on the areas of Ya'arin, Meruchin, El Jabin, Sichin, and Tir Harafa. There was also a report in Al Jazeera that in the Taiba village, a 75-year-old head of the village was killed in one of the IDF retaliations. Moving on to some political news relating to the confrontations between Israel and Hezbollah, there's a report that in the Washington Post that there's growing concern in the United States that Israel is using bombs with white phosphorus in Lebanon, and that specifically these weapons were made by the United States and supplied to Israel by the U.S. The IDF confirmed that it indeed has these weapons and stated that their use is only done in accordance with international law and based upon military considerations. I will note that the IDF came under heavy condemnations internationally for using white phosphorus bombs in the Gaza Strip in 2014. They have not been used since. Different reports and different pictures of the IDF bombings in Lebanon have suggested that it might be using white phosphorus bombs, and different investigations on the ground now have led officials, according to the Washington Post, in the United States to start raising these alarm bells. Relating to other political news between Israel and Lebanon, there are growing reports of different diplomatic initiatives trying to bring about an end to the confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah and not allow a full-scale war to break out between the two sides. According to Al-Ahmar, which is a Hezbollah affiliate, Israeli demands have been delivered to Lebanon and Hezbollah through different negotiators, stating that only if Hezbollah moves all its forces to the northern parts of the Litani, i.e., not anywhere close to the border with Israel, will Israel agree to not invade Lebanon and drive Hezbollah north on its own. According to the report in this newspaper, Hezbollah in turn demanded that they could equally state that the IDF must evacuate all of its forces south of Haifa, i.e. nowhere near the border as well, otherwise Hezbollah will not agree to go north. Following this report, Al Arabiya, which is a news outlet in Saudi Arabia, reported that France has proposed a deal to both sides in which French, US, and Lebanese forces will deploy across the border between Israel and Lebanon, and also that Israel has agreed with international mediators that Hezbollah will even be allowed to maintain several monitoring stations alongside Lebanese and French forces in southern Lebanon, but that the bulk of Hezbollah forces will have to move up north. The sources stated in the newspaper that, I'm quoting, Israel emphasized the need to have the Lebanese military along all points in the border, and that French forces are required to be part of all international forces. So, while no deals have obviously been struck yet, apparently there are very active diplomatic channels trying to figure out a way to avoid a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah and allow the situation to spiral down. Finally, a Hezbollah report today stated that 2 more Hezbollah operatives were killed in Israeli retaliations, bringing the total number of Hezbollah operatives that Hezbollah has claimed have been killed since the war began to 100. Moving on to the regional developments, UK Maritime Trade Operations, UK MTO, updated today about a security incident in a ship that occurred 15 kilometers off of El Hudaydah in Yemen, near the Bab el-Mandab Straits. According to the reports, the incident caused a fire to break out on the ship, however the crew was safe. Hours later, the U.S. military reported that their suspicion is that a cruise missile was launched from Yemen and caused substantial damage to the ship, however, that all the crew is safe. Later reports by UK MTO also updated that the Yemeni Navy, which they stated they're unclear who is representing the Yemeni Navy at this time, ordered a maritime vessel, also unclear if it is the same maritime vessel or not, to change course towards a port in the country. Right now, there are no reports that any more ships have been hijacked. However, one ship, according to these reports, may have been hit by a missile and a fire broke out. The Al Arabiya network also reported that 3 explosions were heard today in the El Huban area, which houses many of the Houthi forces. Locals also stated that they heard planes in the area prior to the explosions. No one took responsibility for any attacks or retaliations. Moving on to other regional developments, there were 2 attacks reported today against U.S. bases in Syria. Hezbollah Iraq Brigade stated that they carried out a missile attack against a U.S. base El-Shdadi located in the Al-Khasqa region of Syria. Hours later, Al-Miyadin reported of an attack against the U.S. Ain al-Assad base in Syria as well. Hezbollah Iraq Brigades then claimed responsibility for that attack as well, stating that it was carried out with a drone. No statements were made by the Pentagon or any other officials regarding these 2 attacks. Moving on to some of the political and general trends that occurred, the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is due to arrive in Israel on Thursday. According to reports, he's going to meet with the war cabinet in Israel and discuss the day-after plans for the Gaza Strip, as well as increasing humanitarian aid and hostage exchange deals. Other political news, amidst the EU call to sanction violent settlers in the West Bank, Israel is reportedly trying to circumvent an EU call for an immediate ceasefire in a meeting that is scheduled at the end of the week. According to the report, Israel is trying to postpone any EU decision on this, hoping that if the issue is in fact postponed, then it will start entering into the Christmas-New Year season, and Israel will be under less diplomatic pressure for a few weeks. Other news, there was a general strike called today in many places in the Arab world in solidarity with the Gaza Strip. Public institutions were closed in Lebanon. Strikes were also seen in the West Bank and in Jordan. And importantly, some Arab Israeli towns in Israel were also on strike, and signs were put up saying they are striking to stop the war. Other news, member states of the UN Security Council visited the town of Rafah today on the Egyptian side, with ambassadors of all countries except for 3, the United States, France, and Albania, accepting the United Arab Emirates call to come visit the town of Rafah and investigate the situation up close. There was reportedly a lot of anger in Israel that this was not coordinated with Israel, and that the member states did not visit the Israeli side to also see the humanitarian situation in Israel. And finally, Russia reported today that following President Putin's talks with Prime Minister Netanyahu several days ago, Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia spoke with the Deputy Head of Hamas, Musa Abu Marzouk, called on the group to immediately release all hostages and emphasized the need for an independent, unified Palestinian state within the 1967 borders. Moving on to speculations regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, spokesperson for the U.S. State Department today, Matthew Miller, stated that the U.S. veto in the Security Council does not mean that we agree with Israel on everything. He referenced, among others, pictures of dozens of Palestinian prisoners being taken in their underwear, adding, quote, "We want to resolve the conflict with as few civilians killed and with a guarantee for an independent Palestinian state, alongside a guarantee that Hamas cannot attack Israel again." Other news, Avigdor Lieberman, who's an opposition member in Israel and head of the Israel-Palestine party, published today his own day-after plan, wherein Israel will transfer control over the Gaza Strip to Egypt, and control over Area A in the West Bank will be transferred over to Jordan. He stated, and I'm quoting, "The only option is to turn the wheel back. The Palestinian Authority cannot govern Gaza," adding a bunch of slurs that he stated towards Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas. Finally, speaking in Israel's Security Committee, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated, yet again, "The Palestinian Authority absolutely will not govern the Gaza Strip. Security responsibility will remain with Israel." Minister Benny Gantz also stated that Israel will hold on to areas in the Gaza Strip for a long time and will fight Hamas wherever it lifts its head. So once again, we're seeing the United States is stating that the aspiration is to develop a future Palestinian state, while in Israel, the Prime Minister at least, and members of the War Cabinet are repeatedly stating that Israel is going to hold on to the security establishment in the Gaza Strip, and that the Palestinian Authority is not going to be reinstated in the area. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.